quite normal in my house to have a jam jar with paintbrushes in, stuck on the kitchen windowsill or something. And like lots of children, you like to copy what your parents are doing. So that's what I did, and I did it throughout my childhood. I did it throughout my teens, not in any serious way, and I never had any ambitions of being an artist. It was just something that I did. Didn't think it to be anything unusual because everybody in the house did it. Anyway, life goes on. Then I opened a paint your own pottery studio, and I had that for about 5 and a bit years, I think. And that was the nearest at that point I'd ever got to painting. I had to teach myself to paint on quite a small scale. That had to be sold, sadly, a few years ago. And then I hadn't really thought anything about painting, really hadn't. And then somebody that I was working with, in the meantime, I'd taught art and English. And I was explaining to an ex-colleague the joys of teaching Year 6 children how to make Georgia O'Keeffe-esque flowers out of wire and tissue paper and PVA glue. The lady that I was talking to knew nothing about Georgia. There's no reason why she should do. I showed her some pictures. She liked them. She said, would I do one for her? I hadn't actually painted, hadn't picked up a paintbrush for the better part of 30 years. And I thought, do you know what? I'm going to give it a go. So I gave it a go, came out really well, did another one. And then I thought, Sue, what are you messing about for? You never used to look at anything. You just used to just paint what was ever in your head. So that's what I started doing. And then my first series was born from that, which I called City Lights. And it's all sort of escalated from there, really. So I exhibit in London a bit. I still, you know, my work has developed. I realise I'm quite a prolific painter. To me, the inspiration really comes from the act of painting itself. Things I see around me, I do seem to be drawn, no pun intended, back again and again to sort of building-like structures in my... They're abstract or semi-abstract, but they're born of that idea. Then, in the meantime, other things just sort of pop up because I'll perhaps just fancy using a particular colour, and I'll just start on the canvas and then I'll just let it develop. And it sounds very sort of unconsidered, but there's no way I can explain how some of the things appear. They just, I get in a zone and they just appear. So I'll make a shape on the canvas, and then I'll make another shape, and then I'll make another shape, and then I'll put something in, and bang, there it is. And then I then have to sometimes try and remember how I did it, because that looks okay. I think I'll try another one. And that's how the last 3 series I've done have really come about, because I have paid more attention to the process. And I've tried to be more uniform in colours, because I can be a bit wild with colours, and not everybody appreciates a lot of, you know, in-your-face colour on the wall. So I've tried to be a little bit more muted, a little bit more subdued. And I did a whole series of paintings that I called Boom, and they were inspired by photographs that I'd seen of from space. Other of my paintings, I could say, let's just say the ones with the white space on the right-hand side is sort of linked to the city lights, because that white space represents my space. That's where it's peaceful for me. There aren't any buildings, there isn't any noise. I've got sort of little things that look like that on the painting. That's sound, that sort of represents sort of sound. And everywhere you go now, once you're out of your own home, is noisy. Unless you're in the countryside, obviously. It's noise. And so you've got the buildings, and you've got an area where they're sort of like a boundary, if you like. And that's my space. That all there, that's all going on. But please just leave me alone. Just want some peace and quiet. Then the series before that, which had mostly sort of like sort of an ochre and grey background with I put some texture into, and it had quite a lot of line work in it. I started thinking about the building because of all construction that's going on. I started thinking about what could be termed the skeleton of buildings. So the frame of the buildings, before they have their cladding or anything to make them what we see once they're finished. And I started thinking about the traditional building materials, when you've got cement clouds and perhaps sand all over, all over there. So that's why I use those colours in the background. So they're sort of linked. the idea of buildings keeps coming back to me. I had this vision, and it was a big white wall like that, with one of my city lights paintings on it, but supersized. At the moment, I'm quite restricted to the size of paintings that I can produce. So, for me, my future, and I would love it to happen, would be to have a much bigger space to work in, and to be able to maybe have enough space to even produce my own canvases of the size and dimensions that I would like to paint on, and perhaps to combine that with maybe a little gallery of my own. I'd certainly love to be able to introduce people. I'd like to be able to introduce people to my workspace, see where it all happens, and obviously just to keep going really. Stellar painting is a privilege almost, because someone is buying into your vision, and that is the biggest compliment that can ever be paid, that somebody loves my work enough to want to live with it every day. It's getting out there, and I just want people to accept what I do. I know that my work isn't the same. I make a point, it's not necessarily a conscious point, but I want my work to be my own. I don't want it to necessarily be inspired by somebody else's art. I want it to be a Susie Hall original, not just an original painting as a one-off, but an original in every aspect really. It is a business, and anybody that says it isn't doing it right.